Welcome to episode 2 of the Mental Health Unfiltered by Stable Minds. Today we're going to be talking about the courage of being vulnerable, and I'm joined with Millie, founder of Stable Minds, and lead counsellor Patrick. So today, instead of doing a question and answer interview style podcast, Patrick is going to have a chat with Millie almost in the environment of a counselling session, obviously without cameras and lights and everything else, but just to really give her that safe space to show how you can be strong and vulnerable at the same time.
So we're going to explore some of your story today, I suppose, what led you to be who you are today in terms of founder of Stable Minds. I know a little bit about your background, but people who are listening probably won't. So do you want to tell me a little bit more about the traumas and the kind of life circumstances leading up to where you are today?
So I got diagnosed with PTSD in 2000 and I think it would have been 2018. And a few things led up to that. So even though that's when I got diagnosed, I'd been through a few traumas beforehand. Okay. But I think the birth of my daughter, I see it as that was the thing that kind of broke me. And then all the other traumas that I'd been through previously was kind of fractured. So I had to go through everything and look at CPTSD and what that looked like for me as a person. So I'm super aware that everyone's PTSD or CPTSD looks differently. But for me, it was really about going to therapy and looking at what that was like for me and how I worked my way through it to become a superpower, which is today.
I know a little bit about the trauma you mentioned with your daughter.
Yeah.
Is there any way of giving us an overview of what that trauma was?
Yeah, so it was ongoing. So my son was 20 months old. No, it wasn't. He was 10 months old, sorry. And we fell pregnant with Eliza. I have experienced miscarriages before in the past, and Eliza was actually a twin. We lost her twin at about 11 weeks, so we thought we were miscarrying again, but we weren't. It was the fact it was the twin. I then went into labour at 24 weeks with Eliza, spent 10 weeks off and on in hospital, and actually gave birth to her through emergency C-section. She was 5 weeks prem. She was absolutely fine, but during the operation, I actually could feel the epidural hadn't worked properly and they couldn't put the anaesthetic in to be able to knock me out. So I felt, after she'd been delivered, I actually felt what they were doing. And then I just remember there was a light above me and that was filling with blood, and they were trying to sort me out, and it was just a horrific experience. There was a few occasions up until that where I'd get rushed in and I'd go into labour again, and it was just a really, really challenging time. But like my flashbacks, a lot of it was that started to come in my nightmares was the birth and a few other bits from hospital.
Firstly, sorry for the situation that you had to go through with all of that, I suppose. It's not nice when you lose a twin. And it must have been scary for you then going through the rest of the pregnancy up to the 24 weeks with Eliza. Yeah. How was that journey from the 11 weeks where you lost one of them to 24 weeks?
Horrific, because I remember them, they put me on a delivery ward. There was no beds. So after I'd lost, and we didn't know we were having a twin, so I don't think it really impacted me that much. I was kind of grateful that Eliza was okay at that point. But they told us that it was a high-risk pregnancy because the heartbeat wasn't what was the word that they used? Basically wasn't strong. Okay. Well, you'd never believe that now. You know, Eliza, she's amazingly feral, so strong-willed. But at that time, I remember sat on that ward thinking, there's all these beautiful mummies with their babies that are fine, and I just lost one, and I was probably going to lose Eliza. So it was really, really bad. And then going through from 11 weeks to 24, it was just constant. It was like every twinge, just kept going into labour. And then they'd give me injections to stop the labour, and then they'd release me for a little bit, and then I'd end up back in. It was just all that uncertainty that went with trying to keep this precious little gift safe, and me believing at the time that, God, it's me, this, I can't look after her. It was horrible.
You mentioned within it all about flashbacks.
Yeah.
When did you notice flashbacks starting?
So they were after I'd given birth to Eliza. So when during the operation, the surgeon said to me it was life-threatening for me to carry any more children. So when they were trying to sew my uterus back up from a C-section, it just kept ripping. So that's when I nearly died. So they said, it's life-threatening, I wouldn't have any more babies. And there was talks about getting sterilised at that point, but we didn't. I think they just wanted to get me out of the theatre and into recovery. So I actually had the coil fitted afterwards. And then that's another story in itself that we can go into, I'm sure, at some point. But it was around that time, so afterwards, that the flashbacks really started coming back, and they started in my nightmares. So I'd have these night terrors where I would wake up and I'd be screaming, and my husband would wake me up or he'd try and comfort me, and I was crying in my sleep. And I just thought, oh God, they're not very nice, these nightmares. But it was different. It wasn't just a bad dream. I was reliving trauma over and over again. Then they got that severe that I would clench my jaw so hard that I've actually lost all my back teeth apart from one, which then obviously meant that I had to go to hospital to get all the shards taken out, which then created more trauma because it was in a surgical environment. Yeah, it kind of got to the point where it did get to the point where I was petrified to go to sleep. I was so scared because with flashbacks, you were literally physically reliving those memories again. And it'd be simple things like I can go to hospital now. So if one of the kids have got an appointment, or I don't know, I had to go in for a big operation last year, it'd be simple things like a trolley coming out of a lift and over the metal doorway. And that triggers a flashback of when she nearly came at 24 weeks and being whisked off from Maxfield to Oldham. And it'll be simple sights, or what I perceive as simple, but it's not, is it? Sights, sounds, smells even, that trigger me to go back to that place and really relive it. So it's so different than it being a memory. It's like the world stops around you and you relive that trauma over again.
And with your PTSD, what kind of have you done to kind of manage your PTSD over this period of time?
It got to the point where I was in a really, really bad place. I was suicidal. I couldn't cope with the way that I was feeling. I couldn't understand it, which I think was the biggest thing. And if my husband hadn't have found me, I wouldn't be here today. I was in a really bad place in 2017. From that, I went to see a couple of counsellors first, and they were lovely people. They just weren't my type of people. It's very much, I remember them talking to me about suicide idealisation, and they were like, oh, how does that make you feel? And I was like, shit, how do you think it makes me feel? Yeah. And I go, no. And one actually said to me, well, you don't want to think like that. So I thought, oh, that's something else that I'm doing wrong, because that is what I think, and that's how I was. And then I remember coming across this lady, and we just got on straight away. I remember our first session, and she's very blunt to the point, but in the most nurturing way possible. And she didn't take anything away from it. She didn't, I don't know, try and make anything better. She's got a pretty dark sense of humour, and I loved it. And that's just what I needed. I just needed someone to say how it was, call me out on the stuff that I needed to be called out on, but in the most beautiful way possible. And it was all thanks to her. To be fair, a lot of Stable Minds is thanks to her, because she helped me believe in who I was.
But before we move on to what you do, I just want to go back to what you said about 2017, if your husband didn't find you.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell me a bit more about that?
Yeah, so after we'd gone through Eliza's birth, we had the coil fitted. Unfortunately, the coil had failed. The lady that was doing it, the doctor, was actually training, which we didn't know at the time. So she fitted it wrong. So I got pregnant, and I remember I did eyelashes at the time then, and I always could tell the smell of the adhesive changed randomly. And I remember sat with this client, and I was doing her eyelashes, and I was like, the adhesive smells different. I've always been hyper aware of things. I was like, I'm pregnant. I know I'm pregnant, and I can't be. And so St. Mary's rushed me into hospital. So Eliza was 4 months, just under 4 months old. Ezra was 20 months. And it was just an horrific time. They removed the coil and said that would probably bring on a miscarriage. It didn't. And I could kind of, as bad as it sounds, I could get my head around a miscarriage, because I don't know, it was more natural the way that I saw it.
Mm.
But then I really had to think about my future and all the risks that were involved with me carrying another baby and whether I was going to be here for my children that I've got now. So they didn't advise, but it was brought up about a medical termination to keep me safe, and I couldn't cope with it. Like, not pro or against, but it's just for me, because I'd had so many miscarriages, my head just wouldn't work. So I remember coming out of St. Mary's and just not being able to cope with that. And then going to, I drove to Green Lane, which is just outside of Cottons, sat in the field. I'd wrote my note. I'd taken things with me, and I just didn't want to be here anymore. I couldn't face what I was going to do. So that was on the 23rd of April, 2017. My husband had kind of realised that something wasn't right and come and found me. But I was just in that place that I truly believed it was my fault. Like, I was the one that was creating all this. It was a really, really dark place to be in. And I think with suicide, it's hard because I truly believed that me staying was being selfish. If I took my own life, everything would be better off. The kids would be better off. Martin would be better off. My family, my friends. And that's what I truly believed at that point.
I can see you playing with your sleeve at the minute.
Yeah, self-soothing.
How is it for you now, talking about it all? How are you feeling right now?
It's sad, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's one of those things that I think I feel sad for that version of me that believed those things, that didn't believe that she was capable of all the things that she's achieved since, and all the people that have helped since, and helped myself. And that is what I really, really wanted to create with Stable Minds, that there'll be a space that there's no judgment, that you can come and say, no matter what, there is someone there to listen. And I think being at that place and understanding what it's like to be there gives Stable Minds, it makes it special, because we get it on a different level. It's not just a textbook sat in front of you, it's someone with lived experience, as much as a lot of the counsellors have had. So yeah, it's tough.
Yeah, I mean, it feels sad listening, you know, so I can imagine that you must have felt 10 times, 100 times more than what I'm feeling right now.
Yeah.
What was your journey like to diagnosis? PTSD, CPTSD?
Challenging, took a long time. And I don't even know if I needed the diagnosis. Oh, maybe I did need the diagnosis. I don't know. I needed to know that there was a reason. I think until you've experienced the flashback, it's okay hearing this is what it feels like, but the depth of understanding, it is literally like you're reliving it. It's scary. I remember coming out of my first proper counselling session and thinking, God, this was worse than the actual trauma. Whereas it was hard to hear, and I'd kind of thought that anyone that had PTSD must have been in a war, or still to this day, if I say I've got CPTSD, they're like, oh, did you serve in the army? Or there's still such a taboo about PTSD.
Yeah.
Or that you must be a really angry person, or it's just no two people that have got any diagnosis are the same. So it's about working as a whole, not just with that label.
Tell me a little bit about what it looks like for you and what you do to manage your PTSD.
So I think understanding it, a massive thing for me is pausing.
Okay.
I still struggle with that today. You're laughing because you know that I do. So when I come in sometimes,
little bit.
and I can be this whirlwind that's kind of like, right, I need to do this, this and this. But then that in itself, I think, you know, that makes me be able to get things done as well. So that's a good thing. Being really secure and grounded in what I believe is my truth, that can be challenging. Understanding that it's okay giving myself some self-compassion. So if I'm going into a hospital, for instance, know that I need self-care afterwards, giving myself a little bit of extra time. Simple things like box breathing that can be sat if I'm sat in a waiting room and looking at something that's square and being able to breathe around that. Surrounding myself with people that know that, do you know what, I haven't always got my ducks in the row, and that's okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, a massive thing is self-compassion. It's tough though. Even 7 years on now, I still have days where I'm like, I thought I'd like worked everything out and got everything, and then the next minute I'm kind of, oh God, I feel really vulnerable and sad.
Yeah. How does it help you in terms of your work today? So how does your experience of everything help you be a therapist today?
I am such a better person today than what I was like 10 years ago. I think I'd lived my life up until the point where I was at rock bottom. I'd kind of lived my life being a chameleon, being things that people wanted me to be, not who Millie was. One of the most powerful things that was ever said to me, and it was by yourself, was as you are, and teaching me that I actually don't need to be anything else other than myself, and that is my superpower. So much so that we've got it at CYP now, haven't we? The words. And I've used it with my clients. And I think 3 simple words that, you know, as I am, it's so simple, but the most powerful message that anyone could have given me, because I'm not having to put a full face of makeup on. I'm not having to be model Millie or previous versions of myself that I thought that I had to be loved and liked. People don't like me. They don't like me, but I know that I'm a good person. And I think that is really, really important. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. If people are watching or listening to this podcast, what advice could you give them?
Reach out. And if the first person that you come along isn't right for you, reach out to another one. I kind of look at therapy as if you go to a hairdresser and you don't like the way that they do your hair, you'll go and find another one.
Yeah.
I think if you have one bad experience with a therapist, if I had stayed with that first therapist that I saw, and again, there was nothing wrong with it, she just wasn't my type of person, then none of this would have existed.
Yeah.
I might not have even been here. Whereas that third time when I found my psychotherapist that is now actually my supervisor, she gave me the ability to see for myself and empower me to be able to achieve things that I didn't even know that I was capable of. So I think that is the one piece of advice, is that you're not alone. There's places out there that can help you. And of course, we're open between 9 and 12.
Yeah, the drop in.
For the drop in. With a good cup of tea.
Coffee.
I don't coffee for me. Yeah.
Coffee machine, definitely. Even though I don't drink coffee, but everyone else does.
Yeah.
Okay. How's it been for you sitting in this space, talking about all this stuff?
I think it's hard. So as a psychotherapist, you were taught not to self-disclose. You were taught that you should kind of be this, not blank canvas, but not to give much away. Whereas I find in the right circumstances, self-disclosure can work so well to enhance that therapeutic relationship. And I know that whenever I put posts out there about the things that I've gone through, the impact that it has on people and the messages that I receive, even though it's kind of scary at the time, the impact of that is amazing. So even though it's scary, the fear of judgment, isn't it? And fear of what will people think about your particular journey, you kind of have to let those thoughts go. Otherwise, like the umbrella wouldn't have happened. So on the morning that I started with the umbrella, those what if thoughts. What if people think it's a stupid idea? What if no one turns up? Look at what's been achieved because I didn't listen to those negative automatic thoughts. It's about learning to pause and be able to sit with them and then work out what is your truth, or what is that belief? Where does it come from? And having that space. It's understanding, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. Understanding yourself.
Yeah. Still learning, but I'm getting there.
Thank you, Patrick and Millie. That was really insightful. It was really interesting to see, Patrick, how you work and how you use sensitivity and understanding to give Millie or anybody the space they need to work through things. Obviously, you've been through a lot of therapy before, and we didn't go too deep, but it was really interesting to watch all of that. So thank you, both of you. If any of what Millie did speak about today has caused you to relate to your own issues or anything, please get in touch with somebody to discuss that, either ourselves or another mental health professional. Over the next coming week, we're going to be inviting guests and inviting them into our safe space to talk about how mental health affects them, how it can affect their lives, their jobs, and how we can find a superpower in being vulnerable.